Rob's ready. All right, so we're reconvening this budget work session. We were going to wrap it up with a question from Councilmember Zulawaga, but I also want to let council know if you really feel a strong desire to continue and you have some further questions that you just want to get out of the way, I am open to doing that if council feels like doing that. Also, if you have certain questions that have not yet been addressed that you do not have the answer to, I know everybody likes to do this for the sake of the public, but I would recommend if you would have time to meet with the city to get your answer. And then you can bring it back to the meeting and say, this was my question, here was the answer. And then the rest of us can quickly participate with you. Because they've got to get this on the agenda sooner rather than later. And so I just want to be mindful because I know you guys all have really good questions. It's important and I appreciate everything you're asking. So my intent is not to rush you, but it is, how do we do this being most mindful of our time and the staff and city's time? City is the community, I mean. So if there are questions we don't get to tonight, we'll do another meeting. But if everyone can come possibly potentially prepared with their questions answered, that would be marvelous. And if you want to press on with a few more questions this evening, we can do that as well. But let's not go till midnight.
No.
Okay. So Councilmember Zulawaga.
Okay, thank you. Well, a lot of it has been addressed in the packet that we received. Has everybody had an opportunity to see the packet with the attachments of the little green lines and brown lines and black lines and stuff? Okay, so on that being the case, my purpose in asking this question of what does the pavement master plan cover for the next 5 years, please help us understand what is needed to get our streets up to our preferred quality. So if Kip or whoever created this map can please explain, it says 2021 customized program for PQI of 70 by 2028. Can you decipher that for me?
So in 2018, finished in 2019, we did the pavement management plan. It gave our roads a score, a PQI of about 50, 54, somewhere in there. We're shooting for a 70. In order to achieve that 70 rating, it said we need to spend anywhere between $800,000 and $1 million, $800,000 and $1 million a year for the next 10 years. We haven't spent any money on our roads lately, all my fault. Trying to continue to get these projects move forward. We have engineering design done on 3, or when I say done, about 90–95% on 3 projects to include Highway 67. I also brought forward the 2021 pavement management plan recommendations that were not completed and the 2022 pavement management plans that we needed to spend money on those projects. And I provided the maps for those. Wasn't me. Those 3 maps kind of show the detail of what's done on certain segments of roads, which application was selected to be done on those roads. Rob's stealing my thunder. So that's what I provided in there. And then all the other expenses in the 410 fund were also not part of the pavement management plan, the sweeper replacement, those type of things.
Okay, great. And my last question about this is I don't see the full depth reclamation very often on the map over the next 5 years. And I just, from conversations we've had and what does that look like? I mean, are we on track to have those surfaces in the city that do need to be reclaimed, that like down where we had the main burst down by, what was it?
The one today or?
No, oh, was there another one today? I missed that one. No, the one we were down by, was it Napa or something? Down in that.
Yes, that was down behind
The new vet,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about that road specifically. On the plan there was Kelly's and Baldwin.
Yeah.
Lake was also on there.
Right.
Lake is not in the budget. So we've had certain members of our community convince our council that we don't need to do full depth. We've had certain members convince our council we need to do engineering on anything that was recommended to be full depth. So we try to do our best with the pavement management plan. If it requires full depth, we'll do a more in-depth engineering analysis on it to see if we need to do full depth for the entire road, because that is the most expensive application.
Mhm.
We haven't had good success or good luck with mill and overlay. However, full depth is you rebuild the entire road. We've done a lot of chip seal around town. So to answer your question in regards to full depth in those areas, I'd have to dig in further into the pavement management plan and the maps for future years to see what roads that was required to be full depth.
So in essence, roads that may need full reclamation aren't really in the 5-year plan, except for the major one like Lake, Kelly, Baldwin, a few of those. Is that?
So
So we're
there's
still am I understanding we're really still unknown about some of the other ones?
So for the next 2 years, I went 2 years out, I believe. I don't think there's any in the plans for the next 2 years, but there are other roads that will require full depth until 2028 is the plan. Moving forward, I'd like to in the future, instead of doing a plan every 4 years, it'd be nice to do a section of town every year. So start breaking the town into sections instead of spending a big chunk of money every 4 years, maybe a little bit every year, and have a more up-to-date plan for those sections. Because roads deteriorate over time. I mean, there's the degradation curve, and when you keep your good roads good, and if you have a bad road, it's gone. Get a little bit of life left out of it, but don't spend the money on it right now, because you just try to use what's there before you rebuild the whole road.
Thank you. That's really completed all the questions that I had about that particular section. So
I would just like to add just a little bit more detail. So the reason I selected for 2022 only 500,000 to be spent on roads is because we're planning on spending so much. It's going to be hard to get all those projects done. It's not the 800,000 that was recommended in the pavement management plan. I also wanted to keep I'll say a decent fund balance, because what we're experiencing in material costs. I want to be able to have enough money in that fund to do a full depth project if that's what's required. So I think the fund balance in the 410 fund after 2022 is projected to be around 2 million. I don't have the budget book right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that's where it's at. Yes, ma'am.
Can you help me understand? So in the packet that Michael sent us, it says that the city has budgeted $500,000 for the roads this year. And it talks about how many feet that covers, but then further below, it also says it should be noted that the 2022 CL feet figures do not include the additional mile of improvement for Kelly's Road, which is 700,000, and 1.25 miles for Baldwin Rampart Road, which is $1 million. So where is that all coming together if we're only budgeting $500,000?
So we're only really budgeting new budget, $500,000 for 2022. All the other projects are old projects that weren't completed.
So that money's carrying over from the previous budgets.
With accurate engineering estimates. So going forward, so originally we had budgeted around 900,000 to do Kelly's and Baldwin.
Okay,
We had engineering done on those. Engineering estimates came back. So it was 700 just for Kelly's, and then about 1.1, if I believe, for Baldwin.
okay.
So those were just carried forward. We were trying to complete them last year. Didn't happen. I'm trying to still get those roads done.
Okay.
Has the ability to obtain materials and labor softened at all?
No.
Is the straight answer is no.
I was at one day this week staffing, I was at 38%.
And that's one of the biggest hurdles in projects, although the larger projects are contracted out.
Yes.
But I know that folks in all aspects are having trouble with labor.
So even materials, we were unable to get asphalt for quite a long time this year because the
Right.
asphalt plants would shut down. And then when they came back up and operating, they'd only sell it to their large purchasers.
Right.
And so we called in some favors with other folks who did projects here to get truckloads here and there, but it's still tough.
hopefully we'll see that improve. I don't know.
We'll see.
Yes.
Just a quick comment, because you triggered this in me. Great job on the manhole on Southwest Street. It looks fantastic again, so
Took us a couple tries.
it was becoming quite the little air catcher. Thank you.
Test your suspension.
So Counselor, are there any other questions that we could go till 9 if you have at least one or two more that you think could be answered within a reasonable amount of time?
I have one that I'm going to bring up and it's going to be controversial. So
No kidding.
yeah, I know. So
What was
I
the
would
word she
like to
used?
offer this time so we can hammer this out, because the bulk of my questions are just answers that
Okay.
are trite, but there is one that's going to be pretty controversial.
Oh my gosh.
Do you want to try to take it?
Let's try.
Okay.
If it gets too
29
heated,
minutes.
And it has to do with the Main Street.
I mean, if it hits 9:01 though, and we're all still,
Yeah, we can always terminate and it has to do with the Main Street. I did not like the vote of last year when we brought the budget down to $5,000. I'm seeing what's the results of that. When I saw that, I did talk to some of the Main Street people. I told them, look, I feel like I'd like to go back and argue to try to make you whole so we can keep Main Street going. So what I'm going to throw on the table a concept of the $15,000 that's in the budget, but I would like to take the 7,000 that we did not give them last year and put it back in so they can replenish whatever accounts they were taking from to make that whole. And so it would be a $22,000 line item. But if there's not a majority that supports that, I'll drop it. I simply told them I would try.
let me address this real quick. I am aware that Main Street is not interested in asking for a budget this year. And they basically want nothing to do with us. They have a particular reason why. I understand what it is. They want to be left alone. I've had this discussion with Michael. I think that that is a very slippery and cowardly slope, because they could set themselves up for imminent failure with future councils. But that is their wish. So unless there is a
Well-
consensus that overrules me, I'm fine with that, but they want nothing to do with council this year. And in order to allocate money to them, I would want them to come before council and do a presentation of what would be the intended use, which they can do. And I have no issue with Main Street, but they don't want to do it. So if you guys put that on there, it will force them before us, and they are asking not to be forced before us.
I will go back and talk to Lori directly.
Mhm.
I did talk to other members that were hoping I would champion this. I had spoken to Lori about it at one time, and she I walked away thinking that she wanted me to champion that. I was surprised at the reports, and I'm trying to piece together the timeline. So let me take that on, because I don't want an unnecessary, controversial.
I don't think it's
Debate.
controversial with council or council members. I think Main Street needs to indicate whether they wish to come before us this year or not. Or if council wants to allocate funds without a presentation, but I am not comfortable with that.
And that's fair.
So-
I need to go back. I was asked to champion it. I will validate that request, because the timelines are a little confusing on what you're reporting and when I've had two conversations, and I don't know if I'm bookending it.
Sure.
And so I'll go back.
And
Sure.
if I may add something too, I had an hour and a half long conversation with Lori Gloth and Gail Wingard yesterday. I'm asking, how did this come about? What are you thinking? And they do have a plan. When it was dropped on the group a couple of weeks ago for all of us, it was There was a lot of questions there. There is quite a bit behind that decision. Whether folks agree with it or not is a different issue. But what Lori committed to doing is summarizing the thinking, the logic that went into that decision and kind of what the next steps might be, and then providing that to the council. Thank you. So that is something that's coming. I don't know when she'll have that for you, but certainly worth a conversation, I would say. But for the benefit of the entire council, she'll have, this is what we're thinking, this is the timeline, this is how the money fits into it, so on.
Yeah, I'm not going to go out and swing at a windmill if the person that originally asked me to swing is saying, I don't want you to do it anymore. It's just I'm getting mixed signals from other Main Street members on fighting the battle, so.
And it's all developed very quickly too. And so that perhaps is not surprising, but yeah, Lori, the board chair, and then Gail is the manager. So they get to make the decision. Yes.
Well, they just need to be mindful of when your presentation occurs to us for the final budget.
Indeed.
So.
That was the only controversial one that I wanted to get ahead of.
See, that wasn't so painful, was it?
I just would like to just
Yeah,
comment
Kelly,
that I support what Rusty has proposed. I see the value in Main Street, and the last meeting, Catherine shared a long laundry list of successes that Main Street has had and projects and events that they have established that are important to this community. And I think losing the momentum on those is not a good plan. And I just would like to see that continue. And I've always wanted to see more of a collaborative effort with other organizations in our community. And I think rebuilding their board might be one step in that direction. And I would support that funding as you described, Rusty. But as Michael said, they're going to share more. And I think that sharing with us is an important component as well. And on a unified front, certainly. So that's just all the comment I
Thank you,
have
but
on that.
I want to make sure that I'm championing something that is being asked to be championed. I've seen a lot of progress this week. I mean, the DDA made a conscious decision, and I watched them do that and the discussion they had about giving that 3.5K when, there hasn't been a lot of cooperation, and they viewed it as a gesture to start anew with a new relationship where Main Street, DDA, Historical Preservation Committee, Chamber of Commerce can all start working together in a common direction. So,
Well, and there's always that opportunity for economies of scale when it comes to that kind of
Right.
collaborative effort.
Yeah, so the only thing I had was their budget was $15,000 and we cut it to 5. So where did you come up with 7,000? Wouldn't 10,000 would get you back to the 15 from the year before, right?
the math I was coming up with, it would be between 7 and 10, but I had decided we had a consensus at 12. though.
Okay,
Not,
that
we
is-
started
that-
at 15.
that works.
Consensus at 12 down to 5, the 7 back, not the full
Okay,
10, because that would be above what we had the consensus.
okay. I wasn't sure where the 7 came from,
Yeah,
so.
and I know I spoke to you about the possibility. I would ask for.
Are you
10.
going to speak
Right.
in your microphone or?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, in thinking through historically, to make it fair, it would have been the 7.
Yeah, I forgot the consensus number, so that's fine.
May I? So let me give you some history on this. And to remind everyone, I was the treasurer for Main Street for 3 years. I came up here before council and argued for their funding for 3 years. The agreement was way back in 2018 that it was prudent and necessary for Main Street to stand on its own 2 feet. Some of these council members had argued that it was not appropriate for this council to designate funds to specific nonprofits. So I have fought that fight for Main Street as their treasurer. I remember quite well what they were told 4 to 5 years ago, which was that they needed to start seeking out their own funding. We were made well aware of what the plan was from council, and we were told we would go from $15,000 to $75,000 to zero.
Oh, 75,000.
Oh, sorry, 7,500
You jumped on that.
to zero. So they had a heads up that they needed to find alternate sources of funding, and we knew it for a long time. I stemmed the bleeding, and we managed to keep our funding at $15,000 for 2 years. And yet they still, year after year after year, have not been able to stand on their own 2 feet and find their own funding source. And now we're in a situation that they're not only not asking for taxpayer money, but as Council Member Nakai just reported, they're being put on a freeze with DOLA for the next 5 months. It is completely egregious for this council to take taxpayer money and not only just pick and choose which organization to give it to, but give it to an organization that is very clearly saying, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what our feasibility is. And I am ridiculously surprised that for everyone up here who wants to self-proclaim they are a fiscal conservative, we are sitting here right now and I am hearing from all of you that you're willing to just throw taxpayer money at an organization that isn't asking for it. Please, someone explain to me what is conservative and fiscal about
I didn't
that.
agree with that. And I said, they're not asking for it. And I said, and there's no way I'm going to give them anything if they're not willing to come before us and give a presentation. And I agree with you, Stephanie. We have a group who we have funded in the past, who's now saying, we don't want your money. And even though I said I think it is irresponsible of them to cut their nose off to spite their face, because just because I may or may not vote for it doesn't mean others would or wouldn't. But I don't think they realize what they're doing either. But I agree with the funding portion. If I have a group telling me, thanks, but no thanks, and we don't want to come to you this year, it is not my job to then advocate that they get in here. But I hear where you're coming from. You were asked to advocate and now you're not sure what's going on. But I think we're beating this dead horse.
Well,
And
I would-
I'll let Rusty, I'll let you wrap it up, and then Robert, you can have your comment. And then I think we need to move on because it's in their house now, not ours.
Agreed.
So.
Stephanie, I think there were 3 really important points in what you were saying. The piece I don't have is the historical piece going back as far as you have. My knowledge starts last year. And remember, Jim Paff and I were the ones that were kind of going back and forth because I agree. It's a nonprofit and it's not right for taxpayers' money to do it, which was why originally the plan was take them from their 30 to 15 or something, and then give them a stair step 1 year. And then we had talked about next year, which would be this year, to go to the 5,000. Okay, and then it just went the year that pulled the rug out from under them. So,
Just to clarify, that was actually an amended plan that went on longer than the
supposed to.
original plan they were given. Based on the original plan, they were never intended to even get any funding this last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so that funding was extended for another year. No rug was pulled out from underneath us. And I say us because I was the treasurer for the majority of it up until mid-2020.
let me change my words because you have a valid point. Not pulled out from under us, meaning the long-term us for the newbies. It surprised me because I was on board with Jim Paff and we didn't agree on many things, but that happened to have been one thing we did agree on, that we would go to 15 and then give them a year, and then we were going to go to 5. We jumped the gun, which is why I was coming in to articulate, giving them back to make them whole, and then we can continue on with that ramp down plan. So I do think of it still as being a fiscal conservative. It's just, I'm connecting my dots, which are shorter period of time than your dots. There were obligations made. I had been told that the city had promised a certain level of support, although it was never codified. DOLA would give them some, the city would, this is what I was told. I'm looking at your facial
I
expression.
hate, because I hate that anyone would ever promise anybody anything.
Yeah.
And it's not,
So,
it's
It
misunderstood.
may be misunderstanding, so
The-
I need to calibrate and getting some better information. But I'm working under what I knew and know up till this instant, that there had been promises that because we had taken the staff position from inside city staff, asked them to stand up a nonprofit, that we would provide a certain level of support as a nonprofit. I was led to believe it was around the $12,000 mark for the executive director's position, which was the in-house thing that went out. So I hear what you're saying, and I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth. I am not going to champion money for them if they're not asking for it. I think it's a bad mistake. I would like to see us have a Main Street, but if they're not, if they've got a plan, they're not asking for it, I'm not going to throw taxpayers' money at them. But I hope you understand where I came up with that 7,000 in timeline that I am requesting.
So I would like to offer, not forcing it on you. I'm happy to give you the information I have, especially regarding the city contributions from Main Street as I know of them for the last 5+ years. I think it's been 4 or 5 years. The other thing I will mention, you talked about the local support. So this is part of their MOU with DOLA to be designated as a Main Street. And there are certain different levels and there are certain requirements for that. And one of the things that DOLA requires, and it's stated at least last time I saw it, was they had to have support of the local municipality. And that is all the paperwork says, this MOU that they sign with DOLA. It is not a financial support. It is not, there is no monetary amount to that. It simply states support of the local municipality. And that can be through any means, whether it's encouragement, whether it's in kind, whether it's financial. So I apologize if you were led to believe otherwise. But again, to my knowledge, as always dealing with these MOUs with DOLA and Main Street, it simply refers to local municipal support. There's no requirement that it be financial support. And certainly there was never, to my knowledge, talk of any limit, $12,000 program manager. That could have been from years ago when their program manager was housed within the city. And the Main Street program was actually a part of city government. And the program manager was paid through the city. She was actually a salaried employee under the city. At the end of 2017, the city and Main Street went its separate ways. And the program manager for Main Street no longer resided within the city and they no longer paid that salary. So I don't know if that's part of where it comes from. Obviously, there's a lot of history. I'm happy to answer any questions you have based on what I know.
I was going to say, instead of prolong,
Can I kind of weigh in? You just keep going backwards and forwards. It's like. I like to make comments, having been the liaison with Main Street, having advocated at our last budget session to increase their budget. If I recall, most of the council at the time was at 0. And I made the recommendation, because I was the liaison at that time, to up it to 20,000. And I thought I was doing the right thing, because infusing Main Street with what they needed, extra budget money to be able to staff their manager and get their ducks in a row. I was counseled by some of my colleagues that they'd already been given that opportunity, that this was already, it was already supposed to be a 0 last year. And so I, in good faith, like you're trying to do, saying, yeah, let's support Main Street, it was a struggle for me. So then I watched it. I was a liaison until Catherine came on board. And I watched them go through that year of reevaluating, just kind of reassessing where they are as an organization. And that's just spoke volumes. You know, they've tried to get board members, people would come and then they'd fall away. They try to get the last volunteer for the cleanup for the last fall. It didn't pan out. So structurally something's going on, and it's not for me to say what that is, but I was so troubled by it when we went to CML. I went to talk to Clay Brown and get his perspective on it. And I think it's fair to say that he said, well, we have a format of a main street in Woodland Park that is unlike other main streets. And he struggles with it because it's a model that doesn't really work. And so from all these different things now, my takeaway is Main Street is in not asking for funds or trying to reassess what works for them. And it doesn't mean that by dropping the ball, as Mayor Pro Tem is saying, maybe they are, but maybe the ball has to drop so that something authentic can come. And what I wanted to segue into, if I might, is last budget session, we talked about vendor fees. And we talked about what are we doing with the vendor fee portion that is not being given back to the vendors, but is going to be spent and accounted for in the downtown development, stimulating of what's happening downtown. So I had thought, great, that'd be a great source to allocate for Main Street, but Main Street isn't coming to that. They're not ripe, I'll just say. But the ability of these different groups and bodies, Historical Preservation Society, Keep Woodland Park Beautiful, DDA, all of the different parts, working parts within our community, I really encourage that. And instead of Keep Woodland Park Beautiful having a cleanup and Main Street having a cleanup, why don't we do it as one, you know? That seems to me to be a better solution. And so if we were going to allocate any funds, maybe they should be vendor fee funds, but should be put in a pool that people can apply for, that they have a realistic project. And if then you would get these different groups working together on projects, and it would be meaningful for the city. But just to toss money at an organization that isn't clear on where they're going to go, I think we've kind of already beat that horse. So my question then is, I didn't see it in the budget as a line item, but this whole idea of the vendor fees, we did promise we're going to account for it. So I'd like to see where we account for that as one of our budgeting steps. I have a couple of other ones. If I might, unless somebody
Can
else
I
has
just
something.
say one thing?
Yeah, please.
I'd like to thank you for that, what you just said. It
Okay.
was very helpful and very thoughtful, and I appreciate that. And I'll take away from, I really do appreciate that.
Oh, okay.
I think it was positive and it gives a little more perspective that maybe I didn't think about. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome. We all add something. Yeah. All right. So the other one,
Before we move on, may I
Yeah.
ask, are we moving off Main Street?
Well, can
I hoped we were, but unless
I
somebody.
just have one question, and it probably is more for Sally, but it was my understanding that, and I could be completely wrong, but it was my understanding that the reason Main Street applied for the nonprofit status was it gave them access to additional grants. They weren't actually trying to be a self-funded by donation only group. Am I correct?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the justifications to become a 501c3, and Ms. Alfieri can maybe justify that. Being the treasurer,
Yeah.
it gave them an opportunity to go after the LPMR and
And the
other
other
private
stuff.
Yeah.
funders.
And not to get into too much
Yeah, I'm
city
not-
history or
I'm not
drama,
trying
but a big part of the split was due to previous city personnel and city
Yeah.
managers. It ended up being, to be quite honest, it was a very unique situation where you have a program manager who works for a organization that has a board but is paid by the city. And so who really controls that program manager? Is it the city manager? Is it the board of the organization she reports to? It was a very convoluted situation. Again, not to get into the specifics of the drama of it, but it ended up being what it ended up being, and quite honestly, the structure of it, that was almost to be expected. It was a very convoluted structure that was had.
Right, but they weren't designed, they didn't design themselves to go out and have constant fundraisers. So they weren't really a true 501c.
Yeah.
So I'm just
And as,
asking them to do that maybe now is
Yeah.
not the right.
They were
As-
formed as a body of this government.
Right.
Gary
I get that. I
Brevetto
got you.
championed that. And
Along
it
with
was
Sally.
And
formed
Sally,
as through the support of this local government and came to be as a department and an operation within the city. And that you just described, the personnel issue is when they split off
right?
from to a 501c3 so that they could keep that person.
Okay.
and
And then it evolved from there.
yes,
All right.
there's a lot
So,
more to
yeah,
it.
there's-
And just to add to what
more
Robert was
devolved.
saying, last I knew, talking about the different main streets and how it was formed under this city council, of about the 40 main streets that are in Colorado, I think there's only one of them currently. This is what Clay Brown was talking about, that is funded separate from the municipality and is not actually part of the body of the municipality. They're connected, I believe, to their Chamber of Commerce through a membership joint that way. And that's to Clay's comment that we've heard before, Clay Brown's comment with DOLA, that independent main streets just, he's seen it tried. It's not a new idea, but it is one that's where a lot of the concern from DOLA comes from. They've seen it tried and it doesn't work. And that's why, again, being under that municipality and being part of the municipal budget gives them the funding and the support that they need. Again, unfortunately, we had a unique situation, as Woodland Park always does. We're always the one-offs. But yeah, that was all how that transpired. Ideally, they would still be under the city government. And that's a better avenue for success. But unfortunately, like I said, history played out the way it did. And we always tend to be the problem children. We always find a way to be the one-offs. So.
And-
It's okay.
and
I think Robert has at least one more question he would like to ask, and we'll let Michael.
Michael had something he wanted to.
Yeah.
Sorry,
no.
just
Yeah,
two,
go ahead.
two hopefully quick things.
Yeah.
So I've set up time myself with Clay Brown and Gail Langley, who runs the Main Street program for DOLA, to talk with them both in a couple of weeks. Aaron and I are going to do that. Aaron actually has some background with Main Street from his previous experience. So that will be very helpful. What I shared with Main Street is, if you didn't take a hiatus, great, but you've now pressed a hard reset button on this process. And so
Yes.
the city is not, I was speaking on behalf of all of you. The city's not willing to just let this go by. We don't know what's going to come out of this. I would like to be a part of it on behalf of the city and find out what is the best practice, to what you just said, Councilman Ralphieri, and try and understand, can we get there? Do we want to get there? Does that fit for us? What is the city's role? And again, just start from zero and said, look, Main Street, if you want to be a part of this, we welcome that going forward, but the city's going to have a role in understanding what that is. And they actually like that idea of partnership. They encouraged me to talk with Mr. Brown, Ms. Langley. And so we'll again, just fresh start again is what they're thinking, complete reset. And the other thing is, do I have consensus to pull the $15,000 out of the budget?
I'm sorry.
Do I have consensus from you to pull the $15,000 out of the budget before we leave it?
Yes.
Because I'm keeping score here, so,
I agree to that.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard anyone say otherwise. Are you okay pulling the Main Street for 15,000 for
I
22?
wanted to find out if they're actually going to come back and ask for it. I thought that's what,
They are not.
They're not.
And unless something is changed in the past 24 hours, what they shared with me is that if council did give them money, it would just sit in a bank account until they're ready to spend it again. So they would have no
I'm not doing
plans.
if
that.
they're not willing to come and ask for it, then I'm not going to champion it.
I
think
like
they-
the idea of that whole start over because I believe in it. I think it's a great program and I think it does good things for our community. but I really like it better under in
And-
our organization.
And they weren't averse to that. They
They were or were not?
They were not. They were not. And so if it's working for other municipalities, Mr. Brown gave me a few different examples, similar in size to us where it does work well. They generally use that model. So it's kind of that hybrid with the nonprofit board to leverage those dollars as was intended. And then partnering with the in-house city staff, as I understand, to do the day-to-day stuff. And that's generally a more successful model.
And I don't want to cut off my nose in spite of my face. I just see the value of Main Street. How we skin the cat, I'm not going to fight for the
Yeah.
wrong model. Yeah. So I guess, Hillary, you're asking.
Rusty, I couldn't
for-
agree more.
We're asking for at a minimum, 4 people to say, remove the 15, and you got 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think we have full
5,
consensus.
6.
That one might be unanimous, actually.
Yeah.
It's
I'm pretty sure that's
unanimous.
It is
consensus.
unanimous.
It is unanimous.
I only want to put a marker in the sand here on 3 items. So one is the vendor fees. I want to see an accounting for where we've spent the revenues of those into the community.
I
And
think you can get consensus on that.
well, I'm just like a placeholder
Yeah.
here of things that I've seen in the budget that I don't see. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. The second one is we're looking at spending $1 million for engineering of the reservoir. But I am part of that part of council who has not been privy to any understanding of where we are in negotiations on
Look at, here he comes.
on the reservoir. I haven't seen the property. I know, but I also understand that we are in negotiations that seem to be floundering. So my question is, I would like a report before we even consider putting $1 million into an engineering project on the reservoir. It might go through, the contract might go through, but at the same time, it might not. And so then if we spend a bunch of money engineering for a open reservoir, maybe there's alternatives for closed reservoir, some other sort of solution to it. So it seems a little bit premature to be saying, yes, we're going to do that when we don't even have a contract.
It won't be spent unless we have a contract.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah. But I would like to be apprised as a council member, whether it has to happen in closed session or whatever. I'm just like, this has gone, because of COVID, it's kind of delayed things. I get it, but
No, it's all me.
okay,
It's all me. If you give me some help, that'd be wonderful.
yeah, okay.
Robert,
keep
would
some
you be
staff.
comfortable meeting with Kip and getting that clarified? And then you could bring it back to council and say, here's what I learned and now I'm happy, or now I'm not happy.
Well, are all of you fully apprised of what's going on with the contract and the reservoir and all that?
And yeah, that's where I was gonna make a clarification. Are you just talking about a general update on the reservoir? Or again, as you said, the contract negotiations have stalled. And I know I haven't been privy to any of the specifics as far as what is causing that stall. And that is quite possibly something that we can't discuss up here in the open.
I get that.
And haven't been privy, I mean, Catherine, if I haven't, I know you haven't been privy
Rusty
to
doesn't.
any of the backstory in
Yeah.
executive session about what the hangups in that negotiation are. So from that perspective, I agree with you as far as getting an update that may not just be a general update
Correct,
that's suitable for public.
right. Okay. And I have a third one. Did you want to make any other comment on that before I go to the next
No,
one?
just well said. A lot of the land negotiations do happen in executive session.
Right.
There has been no movement on the reservoir in a while. That's why you haven't heard anything.
Well, most of the council up here, except for Mayor Pro Tem and Kelly, have zero idea. So it would be helpful to us if you do an executive session and fill us in. That would be helpful. That way, when we look
I
at
love
the,
meetings.
you do, I know you do, yeah. Your family probably does too, right?
Thank you for calling me Kelly. I really appreciate that.
Oh, okay. As
It is-
opposed to
it
council
is
member
my name.
case.
Yes, I do prefer that.
Kelly's in a good mood.
But, and my,
Let's
and
keep
my,
it that way.
and my last point,
I have a question real quick, though. Are
Okay.
you saying you need an executive session before we can determine budget on that issue?
Yes.
Or
Yes, I am saying that, yes.
because,
I don't think there's enough time for me to do that. I would gladly remove the 1 million out of the budget if it makes you feel happy to not be obligated there. It's simply there as a placeholder. So when everything falls into place.
Right.
You can move
Then we
we
could
can move
appropriate it
forward.
later, right? Is
Takes
that,
2 readings,
it takes one,
2 meetings to do an
Well-
ordinance, to do a supplemental.
right?
If we don't get a contract, he won't spend the 1 million.
I know nothing about the contract. I know nothing about where we are
well,
with
that's
it.
what
I-
I'm saying is the
that's
two
why.
of you could meet.
Well, and to be in all fairness, it can be in the budget, but you will be approving a contract with an engineer to spend.
Yeah,
that
we have
money.
to see the contract ahead
Yeah.
of time and approve the contract and
It's in the budget or not, it's not getting spent until he gets. the
Your
contract.
mic's off.
my, yeah. Sorry.
I wish we had our attorney here. Can we be read into the contract without calling an executive session individually? I know everybody's looking at this.
Yeah, we
Like,
didn't have an
Can
attorney here
Kip
tonight at
update
all.
each one of us that
Yes.
is not apprised of this separately without
an
calling an executive session? I know I just added like, you're looking at me like, I said I don't have time, so that involves now 4 meetings instead of 1 executive
You can do
session.
2 at a time.
Why don't we
The
just do an executive session? I
Is
mean,
for the
how tough is
council
that?
to
One time.
meet in a meeting to all together to get updates on something that can't be done in public. Individual meetings with the staff is always allowed.
Yes, and 2
For
of you
anything.
can meet at a
We could
time.
be, we can do it 2 at a time. You
Yeah.
don't have to do it.
2 at a time.
So maybe
Maybe you do.
I'll leave it up to you.
But
All
but what I was saying
So
was,
9:15, we're good.
what I was just gonna say was.
Right?
I know. Kip can tell us, give us $1 million. It's not going anywhere until we sign the contract, and we're not gonna sign the contract until council approves it. So putting it in the budget isn't gonna change whether we spend it or not. It just gives him the flexibility of once we sign the contract, he can go spend the money. So
Right. And the probability that that would
Which takes
happen
one
before
meeting.
April is probably
It's
next
probably
to
slim to
nothing as
none.
well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Half of us may not even be here.
right.
And then there's all that, right?
Right.
Well, so.
But it's a good
my third
question.
point, so we can move on. I mean, so how that all happens, I'll leave up to staff and you guys. I mean, I would prefer an executive session because we can all talk together instead of having partial conversations. That's my personal preference about it, but, and you only have to show up once. So from that standpoint, that would be my preference on that.
We can also cover it during our regular one-on-ones with you too.
Yeah.
Just something.
Yeah, but we don't get the opportunity to talk about it together. So, yeah,
But if you're worried, as I am, about Kip's workload,
yeah,
we
Yeah.
yeah,
we can, sometimes he comes to those.
1 meeting would be preferable,
okay.
but I can do whatever you need. So.
Thank you, Kip. Yeah. My last one has to do with the Woodland Park Aquatic Center. And that is that we've done such great inroads into offsetting our expenses with the Aquatic Center. And then when I looked in the budget and I see that we are looking at, sorry, Cindy, hi. And then I see that last year we were taking out of the general fund $333,000 to offset the expenses. This year it's supposed to be 366,000. And so I'm just concerned how this works, given the fact we've been doing so well of streamlining things, why we are escalating.
I think part of it is staff and the fact that it was closed during COVID and stuff. So there's some of that issue, but we can let Cindy address the.
Well, that dropped it to 269 or something. So, but yeah, please, Cindy.
Inflation?
Yeah,
Huge,
Really?
huge.
So please ask your question again.
Hi, Cindy.
Hello.
It's just, I recognize that
Let's get the
last year
pool
we
out of the way.
appropriated $333,000 for the Woodland Park Aquatic Center. I think we spent about 269 or 279 or something, if my memory serves me right. And next year, we're asking to appropriate 366 million. And I just wonder, yeah, right. Sorry.
I know, I was gonna say,
75,000, right? Yeah, right.
Cindy, where you get all that money from?
Falls from the
Magic.
heavens.
Right?
Swimmers have gold coins in their pockets.
I wish. I'm not following you. I'm not seeing where your numbers are. If you could help me see your numbers.
Okay, page 16, maybe? Page 16 shows general fund, aquatic center, 2021 projection 279. 2022 budget 366, 593. And I remember just out of my brain, the 2021 request was $250,000. And I'm guessing that because of COVID, that just changed the number down to a projection. I don't see the actual budgeted amount. There's not a line column in here on this page that tells me what was budgeted, just as projected.
Any details? Is there- This is the summary. Is there detail?
So are you looking at the difference between 2020 and 20?
I'm looking at, given the fact we have reclaimed profits from the Woodland Park Aquatic Center over the year and really drilled down on new revenue generating places, how is it that we have now a budget for 2022 that exceeds our budgeted for 2021, which was 333,000, and our projection for 2021 is at 279? I just wonder how we get such a big spread there. And this is just a placeholder. I'm not meaning to make us rack our brains tonight. Just when we come back and convene, if we can kind of address that, that would solve my questions.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. I agree. I definitely would like some more information, because looking at this, not including 2020 as the COVID year, 2021, we projected adopted budget 120,000 for daily use fees, but year-end projections are only 58,000. Punch and pass cards, 169,000, projected is 95,000. But again, for the proposed budget for 2022, we're looking at that as nearly double what the year-end projection is again. So I'd like to understand better where those expectations are coming from. Because it does feel a little uncertain that we're basing a lot of expenses off of some revenues that historically we haven't seen before.
So if I could help with the estimates on our revenues and our expenditures. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of historical data to be able to work off of. Because the first year is brand new, everything's exciting. Second year, reality happens. Third year is pandemic, and 2022 will be our fourth year. We've gone through different staff changes. We have a very proactive, very experienced new aquatics manager that has great expectations for more programming, which is going to increase your revenues at the facility. It's not necessarily your annual pass holders or your punch card holders that are your revenue generators, but your programs. So we did not change the budget significantly from 2021 to 2022, just in anticipation. We're not really sure where it's going to go, but we do anticipate more revenues than what's actually expected in the budget.
And yeah, and that's why I specifically touched on the daily use fees and the punch passes, because it does look like everything else numbers wise, year to year budget is relatively the same, except for the fact that, again, for instance, 2019 daily use fees audited amount was 98,000.
Yep.
2020 was 28,000. This year projected to be 58,000. So the fact that we're budgeting off of 120,000, I don't mean this to be harsh, but I think that sounds like a pie in the sky sort of number when we don't historically have that revenue to show or even close to it. And I am concerned with the fact that this pool is already running a deficit, that again, we're looking at expenditures based on revenue that may not be as accurate or reasonable as it should be.
So I completely understand your concern. I can say that we have since 19 to current, we have a very active marketing campaign for the Aquatic Center. Sarah, who works in our department, she has 32 different avenues that she is marketing our programs. And most of our stuff is for the Aquatic Center. We have different plans of getting information to the actual users in the facility. And then we also have plans for continued outreach. We haven't had the capacity or the staff member before to do that. And I think that will make a significant difference as well. The historical data, I wish we could really rely on that to be a solid number. I don't know that $120,000 is a pie in the sky. I believe that we can do that, and our aquatics manager believes that we can do that as well. If we're marketing the place or the facility the way it should be marketed, there are still many people that don't even know we have an aquatic center. And those people even live in Teller County. And that's kind of a sad story to us. So we're really working on the marketing of our facility as well. I hope that helps answer your questions.
From the original, from the first year, like 98.
Yeah. Is your marketing
I'm thinking
gal the one who organized the Halloween at the Memorial Park?
So Sarah Minton is our program coordinator, and that she did coordinate the trick or treat. Last year it was coordinated by Grace, who was my admin assistant at that time.
Okay.
And then Sarah took it to another level again this year.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was at that event. It was amazing. Thousands of kids showed up. And that was like, wow. And 3 o'clock or 3:30 and their parents too. It was like, she did an awesome job. And I saw there were people there from Colorado Springs and stuff too. So if that's what your marketing thrust is, I've got confidence in it. I just want to
total
say.
confidence.
Yeah.
So, and one other thing on that table that we were looking at.
Yes.
You pointed out on page, I think 14 in yours and 16 in the other version.
Right.
Something we talked about today. There's conservation trust money that we've, for 2022, we've moved over from doing a project at the UPCC over to WAC.
75,000, right?
That's part of the 75,000. It's
only
a
part of
lot
it?
of that was already part of WAC and was already being used for WAC, but I think, was it 17,000? I can't remember what the delta was. But that's also the entirety of the CTF has been moved to WAC. And we were talking today and believe that should be counted as revenue. And that should be on that table as well, because that's non-taxpayer, non-general fund dollars that are being used to the WAC to offset the cost. So it's not punch cards or programs, but it is revenue that's not tax dollars. So that I really believe, when we talked about it today, just today, that should be counted as that against that revenue too. So that number would be a little bit better. And I wish I'd written down what the exact number is. I think it's 17,000.
It's 32,700.
But Aaron was here.
So God, if you take that 32,000 and allocate it into those numbers, what does that drop it to? What's the outgo what's the projected outflow from the general fund to the WAC for 2022?
So that would impact what the general fund is doing, but it would, for this table, it would change this number because we're looking at how that number changes over time. The revenue number would be higher for 22. So that 366 number you mentioned is not going to be as high. It's going to be 334.
So back to $333,000.
So it's more, it's a better number. But just to address that point that you brought up.
Okay, so they just meant to be placeholders. I didn't think we'd solve it all tonight, but thanks. That was very helpful. Yeah. And thank you too.
Okay, so we're done, but just a second, Kelly.
But
If there are issues that you have place marked, is staff aware of them? Is it something you can resolve with staff on your one-on-ones? And even if it can be resolved, please introduce your question and answer then. Do you all feel like we need another budget meeting?
Mhm. I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Planning first reading in next meeting?
We were hoping to have first reading by the 18th. So
That
a
would be-
a week from right now is Veterans Day. And so we would have to figure it out somewhere in there
so we would need a special session next week.
or early. Yeah.
Yeah. So is everyone available? What day works best for you guys?
I'll have to look at my calendar.
I will be out of town starting on Wednesday. I'm sorry, Thursday.
So. What day was it?
It's on Monday, but it's at 4:30, but I can move it.
Okay, so can everyone be here on Monday?
Depends what time. I have a class at 5.
I'm available at 5, or I'm available anytime after 1:30, after 2 o'clock.
Or Tuesday?
Tuesday's good.
You're still here Tuesday?
Wednesday, I'm good.
I'm pulling up my
anytime.
calendar.
Yeah, Tuesday, I don't have any problem. Tuesday at 5.
Robert's good Tuesday,
I can do Tuesday.
Catherine, Kelly, Stephanie.
I can do 5 on Tuesday.
Okay, so November 9th, 5 o'clock.
Until we're done.
What do you want for dinner? No.
5 o'clock.
6 council members
Whiskey.
enter, only 1 leaves.
Everyone wants whiskey for dinner, Suzanne.
Whiskey or wine? For wine. Wine works too.
Give Rusty.
If you want to, if you're serving whiskey, I don't know that I'm gonna last the session.
That is my point.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, Rusty would like wine.
Wine, red preferably.
Dry red,
So we can get through it happily and quickly.
Nice. How about nitrogen? Or helium. I'm sorry. Helium.
Okay. So next Tuesday, 5 PM, November 9th, we will have another budget session. If you can get an opportunity to meet with staff to get your questions fulfilled ahead of time, so we can just cut time in half, but still get the question and answer out, that would be great in
Well,
the
so I had a
public.
question for you. We're talking about-
There's no questions allowed.
Well, if we talked earlier about having something with Kip, shall we also plan to have an executive session at that time? Do that first maybe and then go into the meeting? Would that be a way we don't have to go back over it again? It'll be done?
I'm good. If
Well,
you
I-
all Need to meet with Kip for information, please do.
Yeah, I feel like I understand.
I know you do and.
Yeah, so Kelly and I don't
Kelly
You
need,
all need to meet with Kip, please do.
So that was my proposal.
I
What
don't
if,
know if it's appropriate, an executive session. It's the reasons to call an executive session. We're
Right,
not,
'cause
we're
you're
not
not-
in contract negotiations.
there's no contract to
Right.
discuss.
I can't imagine what the reason for the executive session would be.
Advice.
Yes.
I'm not sure we're asking.
Yeah,
And Kip can explain, I think the majority of what you have questions about, I think he can just explain in a public setting.
well, why don't
Because there's no
you explain
contract
it to us
detail.
on Tuesday at 5 o'clock? Is that?
Kip will be
We
here for
start
the
off with
budget
you, you
meeting.
explain your stuff and then we can go into the rest of the budget.
That would be fine.
Does that work?
I sleep here, so whatever you want.
Popcorn.
Whiskey.
That works.
Okay,
That's good.
very good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
So
sir.
just reiterate, meet with staff if you have certain questions.
We don't bite. Usually.
Yeah,
Everything.
I have candy, I have coffee. Come visit.
yeah. So,
Not enough, right?
all right, very good. This session is over. Thank you very much,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.